Hi, do you love horses? Because at Kavago Stories, we love horses. We love them a lot. We'll be talking to notable and amazing equestrian personalities from around the world. Our podcast, Kavago Stories, is on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. You can subscribe now or write to us at support@mykavago.com. That's support@mykavago.com. May the horse be with you. Scott Trees, I'm so delighted to have you and speak to you today. I have a story to tell you. I grew up in a small city in Saudi Arabia, Tabuk. And we used to get like these monthly Arabian Horse World magazines, the thick ones.
Yes,
and I used to browse over them all the time. And we're talking about the 80s here. And I used to know all the horses' names and what they looked like and all their features. So Bandos, Pedron, Basque, all these iconic Arabian horses. And I used to also see this really unique signature, like an S and a T. And I used to think, I wonder who that guy must be. And of course, later in life, I met this fantastic human being. And for a living, he'd take photographs of Arabian horses, but they were just not photographs. They were moving art. There was this feeling that you had. And I didn't realize until I met you that I'd actually already known your signature for so many years. It's an honor to speak to you.
Well, Taz, let me turn up my hearing aid so I can hear you a little better. No, Taz, thanks. I had an incredible opportunity to come along at a time in the Arabian horse industry in particular where the industry boomed, and I came along at the right time with a different look that definitely I approached it as an advertising photographer that if you're going to use an image to capture attention, I don't care if it's cars or fashion or horses, that picture needs to get attention. And that was always my goal, was to create pictures that stood apart from everything else. And I came along at a time when the industry did this and budgets were phenomenal and people were looking for something different, and pretty much any idea I could come up with, people wanted to get it done. I mean, it was an amazing time.
I can imagine that. I remember again that some of these horses, they were so prized and they're so valued. And in many ways, the Arabian horse was being proliferated around the world, but this time with this glossy form of marketing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I was part of the machine that created the Arabian horse as living art. I mean, in the long term, quite frankly, I think it hurt the industry more than it helped it. But at the time, I mean, the tax laws, at least in this part of the world, were very favorable. So, horses were selling for tremendous amounts of money. There were tax advantages to it. Movie stars were involved. The sales had, opening sales at Losma had, the Pointer Sisters, Sammy Davis, Bob Hope, opening the sale. I mean, it was amazing, and we were all too young and too stupid to realize it doesn't last forever. But it was an amazing time, and I think it set the stage for a lot of other aspects of the industry to try and follow. But I mean, in that era, the Arabian horse industry was here, and the rest of the industry was here in terms of its marketing.
Sure.
They were always extremely. It brought in the best and the brightest from a marketing point of view, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the innovation that I saw in those magazines and how it evolved into the life of the Arabian horse, and even until today, you can see that kind of marketing machinery when Arabian horses are promoted. Of course, you have events like the Dubai International Horse Fair or Salon de Cheval in France, and yet the Arabian horse seems to be equally iconic, equally magnetic, if you will. And I think, Scott, you were probably at the forefront of technological innovation so many years ago in that time.
I was. Interestingly enough, when computers came out, I bought the second computer. At the time, I lived in Asheville, North Carolina. I bought the second IBM computer that came into town. I had a two floppy disk drives and a whopping 10 megabytes of storage, but I was good to go. And I tried, and I was also I had been shooting 16 millimeter film through a company in Dallas, and about that time, video more at a consumer level started to come along. VHS tapes, beta tapes from Sony Beta. And I saw that the advantage right away to combine that computer and video, and started the company called Equine Network that was designed to utilize video for selling horses and combining buyers and sellers. And then I also took that into sale videos for people that needed to have professionally done videos, because at that time the cameras weren't that good at the consumer level, and sale coverage. And so definitely I was in there. And when the internet came out, I was one of the first companies with CNN and somebody else, I can't remember who it was, to have video on the internet. But you had to be a major, I couldn't even get to it. You had to be, the guys that designed it for me were amazing. But so yes, I definitely had seen the technological possibilities, shall we say. And this was in the early 80s when I started doing all this.
Yeah, I mean, Scott, needless to say, you're a pioneer in the horse world, and iconic too. I mean, I still pinch myself from the first time I met you.
Well, I appreciate that, but you're my brother from another mother, so we clicked right away. So it's the pleasure's mine too. You need to know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have every bit as much vision as I do.
Look, you and I are probably cut from the same cloth.
Yeah,
that
entrepreneurial weave.
Entrepreneur weave, playing around with technology and seeing how that can help the horse world. Maybe I'm an extension of yourself in certain respects.
Well, that would be, I hope it works. It's not an easy ride.
It's not an easy ride. I mean, it's interesting you say that, because I look at the horse world right now, and technology and the horse world has evolved considerably
yes.
Over these last 30, 40 years. And yet I find that the horse world seems to lag behind when it comes to technology and innovation in that sense.
I think in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. I'll agree with you. In some ways, I won't. I mean, I think there's some ways is that obviously the computer aspect of record keeping and that kind of stuff has impacted all industries. I think that, I'm starting to read more about that they're using sensors and training and monitoring horse health, foaling monitors, 3D printing for shoes, medical advances, et cetera, and robots to lift horses and sensors and helmets for riders. But those are all things that specifically help the horse itself, but not necessarily to promote or enhance the industry. And I think that's where, yes, you're seeing on Facebook, you'll see that people are trying to sell horses. But yet Facebook limits that. I don't know how their logarithm works, but it's harder to show, and so people are sending out emails. But in terms of that central source, there's not been anything really promoting the industry, and not their breeds are trying to promote themselves, but the industry itself, at least in this part of the world, is doing this, because millenniums aren't as interested in buying horses. They want that immediate feedback. Kids don't want to have to work that hard. The biggest market in this part of the world is the 35 plus female that is either an empty nester or a successful businesswoman that is looking to fulfill her dream of always having a horse. And so, you have various breed organizations promoting themselves, but you don't necessarily have the horse itself being promoted, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting you say that. And in many ways, Kavago is kind of designed to solve some of these challenges.
Exactly.
When people choose not to own a horse, but still get the same kind of excitement of being near a horse or around a horse, or in some ways experiencing the different breeds of horses that you can ride, perhaps around the world. Um, the intent is to have Kavago solve some of these challenges.
Well, I think that's exactly what I was just going to say, that you've done a great job in terms of bringing for horse enthusiasts. Let's just say that, you know, Arabian horse people or Morgan horse people or saddlebred quarter horse, whatever venue they're into, they kind of sometimes stay a little focused on their venue. They do this a little bit, but there are millions of people out there that are just interested in horses. And I think what you've done is to provide a portal that can bring together those diverse interests into one local source and give them a lot of opportunities to experience horses. And there's a lot of people that don't want to own a horse. There's a lot of people that just want to be involved with the horse. And I think your timing is fortuitous with COVID-19 coming along, because you know, there's definitely been an impact on all industries. I think, and on the horse industry, you're finding, from the show horse side of things, which in all honesty, that's been the bulk of my marketing efforts, were involved with show horses, because they were trying to sell a horse or sell sperm, one of the two. And the pictures were used to do that. And so you're finding, though, but for the trainers, you know, the shows were here have just been recently, have the shows been coming back. So trainers who make money on training, but they make their profit in horse shows, they were hammered big time. And then you have the owners of these horses, and in some cases, their job hours were cut back, or those kinds of things. You're having the vendors at horse shows because there's no spectators. So all of those things have, you know, there's nobody at the racetracks, and when they did have races, there's no people there. So betting is off. You know, so, and all the spinoff industries like mine, that, you know, if people aren't promoting a horse, there's no need to have photographs. If they're not selling a horse, there's no need to have videos. So, you know, everybody's been impacted by it that way. And so along comes Kavago, where you've got this, okay, look, you've got some time now, and you're you know, people that are taking the time that they might not have had before to start looking for other venues, other possibilities, other outlets. And I think that's the beauty of what you've done. You've provided that portal.
Yeah, I look, I'm really excited about it. And I think I'd like to touch on another thing where, you know, there are gems in the horse world that people who love horses would love to experience. I still remember when I went to Janów Podlaski in Poland, and that was a place I wanted to visit ever since I was a child, reading those same magazines,
Right.
Horse World.
Magical place.
What a magical place it was, or it is. And what's really amazing is that I was able to go there with one of your cameras. And I, I think had I not known you, or had I not known as much about Janów, I would never know that there's this haven for Arabian horses in Poland. And I pursued that journey there, and I think you'd put me in touch with Marek Trela, who's the director there. So that gave me an opportunity to actually access this place. There are places like that in England. There are places like that in Spain. I mean, I got a chance to go to Igual de Cartuja, which is almost the pinnacle of the Spanish horse, the PRE. A breeding program. It's such an exquisite place. These horses were preserved in a monastery, and that heritage still exists. So there's all these gems in the horse world, regardless of where you are. And I think with more than 500 different breeds of horses, each breed brings about a different culture, a different experience, a different story. And I think Kavago, for me, makes that effort to tell that story the way it should be told.
Well, and I think you're starting to do that. I mean, I remember several years ago when you first came to me with this idea, and you had a dream, and I certainly identified with that entrepreneurial spirit and that dream. And it's been a real pleasure for me to sit back and watch you make it happen. I mean, you've got the site, you've got the app, you know, you're definitely, and you've got a great team of technical people behind you, and that's the key, you know. And I think that none of us know how this COVID thing is going to play out. I mean, I'm basically, from my own entrepreneurial self, I'm looking pretty much at everything for 2021 now, and with a question mark. Can I? You and I've talked about that Portugal venue that you've told me about, and some other places I'd like to go. I'd like to go back to Mongolia. I've got several places I want to go, my workshops, but then, you are also providing some other outlets, as we discussed, for potential online forums and those kinds of things that we can share. I think you're creating a site where you're bringing together that diversity. You're bringing together those 500 breeds and giving people a chance within those breeds to share and let people see that there's a whole lot out there to do yet. I mean, in my case, I'm 2 generations away. I mean, I remember my grandmother telling me about taking the carriage to town and having their Sunday carriage to go to church on Sundays. Remembered seeing her first car. So I'm 2 generations away from horses being critical to our everyday life. Sure. So we're not that far away. I mean, it wasn't until 1948 that the cavalry was decommissioned in this part of the world. So,
yes. Yeah, I think what's interesting as well, you talked about bringing this global horse community together. That's, I think, what I'm most excited about. So far we've learned about the different cultures of the horse, either through books, perhaps a television program, sometimes the internet, but they still feel so disparate. They still feel so distant. And what my big dream is to bring this global horse community together, because sometimes it really doesn't matter whether you ride Western, whether you ride dressage, whether you do show jumping, or whether you want to go for a hack by the beach. It doesn't matter. And yet there's so much diversity and richness in the world of horses, and the people, millions of people.
Well, I think the common denominator there is that everybody, regardless of their discipline, loves the horse.
You got it.
And I mean, I've had the good opportunity to experience a lot of those different breeds, and there was a common bond that they all, they all were neat creatures, and they all had many of the same characteristics. And the other element, and as you know, I've had the good fortune to travel the world doing what I'm doing, and found that in parts of the world where I didn't speak the local language, I did speak horse.
Sure.
And so everybody got along. Even though I remember when I was at Turstud in communist Russia in '83, and Sasha Ponomarev was the stud director. Didn't speak a word of English. I didn't speak a word of Russian, but we both instantly recognized each other as horsemen, and we got along famously for 2 weeks. And so, there is that common denominator, that the love of the horse, and I think Cavago is providing a portal for that. You're bringing together people that love horses and a chance to experience them in different ways that they hadn't thought about before.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I echo that story. I met this wonderful rider in Portugal, and I was visiting her yard, and she clearly didn't have enough time. She was in a hurry, but she was so generous, and she accommodated me. And she said, "Look, can you stand next to the arena? We'll continue to talk. It's just I'm short on time." And I was like, "I'm grateful for your time. And you've been so nice to me, and I've just literally just arrived here." And she said, "No, we get each other. We're horse people."
Right.
It's a common language.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is. It's funny. I met just down the road from where we lived. I stopped by I saw a neighbor out and stopped by to say hi to her, and she was in her, she's a beautiful young lady, but she was in her dark sweatsuits and had horsehair all over and had her barn boots on, and said, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're seeing me like this." I said, "Look, you're a horsewoman. You're cleaning the barn. You're doing your horse stuff." I've seen it. My daughter, my mother, my ex-wife, everybody. It's just, you understand that it's just horseness.
Yeah. It doesn't matter where you're from. We all seem to connect.
We all understand that. And I think that's where I've been fortunate, is because I think one of the things that I grew up with horses. I don't never know a time in my life I didn't have horses in my life. And I'm a horseman. I have to be a horseman to have put horses in the situations I put them in, and get the shots that I get. I have to be very aware and understand horse behavior very well. And so I think horsemen can pick that up right away. So when in the part of the country I'm in now is big in the hunter jumper dressage world, where I was not as well known as I was, say, in the Arabian world or some of the other venues. And yet you start talking. There's maybe at some point there's a little bit of this, oh, yeah, you photographed Arabians and you don't understand. It's like after about 10 minutes of conversation, and you start talking horse, and think, oh yeah, well, this guy does understand horses. I mean, and that, I think that's again the common ground that we all share.
Yeah, you got it. And Scott, I wanted to also talk to you about the fantastic work that you do at the Sombrero Ranch,
Yes.
and your photography clinics. I mean, that must be so exciting.
It is, and I do need to clarify that is not my workshop. That is a workshop sponsored by the Equine Photographers Network, but I've been the lead instructor for 14 years now, and this year we didn't have it because of COVID. But yes, it's an amazing experience. I mean, it's very few people ever have a chance to see large herds of horses, and the smallest herd we've worked with is 695 head, and the largest herd is 1,200 head. And
Wow.
and so when you see 1,200 head of horses moving down a beautiful valley, and it's not just the visual sight, it's the auditory sight, the nickering, the sounds of the hoofbeats as they're coming at you. There's nothing like it. And I saw that in Poland, not that many horses, and I saw that in Russia, same thing, where they had large herds of horses, several hundred, on average. But I've never, there's not many places you can go see 1,200 head of horses. Now, I did see that in Mongolia. I saw some huge herds in Mongolia. But, Sombrero changed a lot of things for me because, as I said, I grew up in the show horse world. And so, there was an element of that I felt some sadness for the show horse itself because it was in a box stall. It got brought out when they're well taken care of. Don't get me wrong. They're well taken care of, but, they get out to exercise when they're extras ridden or worked, and they don't get a lot of pasture time. Some do, but most don't. And so all of a sudden, I'm around 1,200 horses being horses, and I think sometimes we forget, that they're herd animals. They like to socialize. They have a very rich vocabulary. They have amazing social interactions and hierarchies, and so that has been such a treat to watch and chronicle over this period of time. That has been such an incredible element to chronicle from the standpoint of the first part of the workshop, the first early in the week, is they bring in about anywhere from 100 to 200 horses for me to set up set up for my students. So I'll find shots that I think are going to work, and I set up these amazing shots for my student. I'll have, for example, we have a back area that we use, and I try and give certain shots are my epic shots. I know everybody's going to want to have a chance to do something like it. So, I'll set them out and I'll have 100 horses come at them in a dead run. And, with cowboys, it's not just the horses, it's the riders and the cowboys and, the whole venue. And it's a real chance at a Western lifestyle. But the first thing I do is the very first morning, I usually start with a horses coming through water at them. The steam's up and it's backlit and it's beautiful. But before we shoot, I make them put their cameras on the ground, and I make them turn around. You think, it's like I put my camera down, no, turn around, and I say, close your eyes, and I want you to listen to this first before you photograph it. And so I make them bring the horses through the water and have them listen to it, and that kind of starts the workshop. I try and do that with all my workshops, but that one in particular, that's kind of a goosebump moment for everybody, and it sets the stage for the rest of the week. So it's a neat experience for sure.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'm really excited about is that, learning photography from the man himself, Scott Trees, through Cavago is something I'm really looking forward to creating that page.
Well, I am too, Taz. And one of the nice things for an old warhorse like me is that I have a lot of experience, and I'm at that point in my life where I want to share that experience. And what Cavago's doing is providing an outlet. I mean, it is. I think the one thing and I'm of that generation where social media, I use it, but I'm not real good at it. I'll be the first to admit it. And you've got together this amazing team that is bringing a market in for somebody like me that can say, hey, I've got things I can share. I've got things I can help you with. And you're providing me that portal and that outlet to make that happen. So, it's a win-win for everybody. And that's what I love about what you're doing. I mean, you're trying to make this a win-win for all of the people that get involved with you. I mean, it's a great deal for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head. It needs to be a win-win for horse lovers, hosts on Cavago, horse experience providers, because I think we all grow by holding each other's hand, and I think that's really exciting.
Well, I think it's, the one thing I think that all this technology did is it made the world a much smaller place.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things that Cavago is doing is that you are bringing together the global horse community. And I don't think anybody's tried to do that before.
I think it's an exciting mission to get behind, and I'm so grateful to have a chance to talk to you about it, and also
I appreciate the opportunity, for sure. No, Taz, it's been a real pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, and I wish you nothing but the best of success. I have to tell you that I'm proud to be a member of the team.
Likewise, I'm proud to be able to work with such an iconic human being and someone who's an all-time great in the horse world.
Oh, thanks a bunch.
You can subscribe now on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Or you can write to us at support@mycavago.com. That's support@mycavago.com. Thank you for listening in. We can't wait to hear from you. May the horse be with you.